since the election. It seems much longer than that. And in those 5 days, I think, once we'd all recovered, and it certainly took me a couple of days to recover from the horror and the shock, it's already been becoming clear what some of the things that we're going to be facing over the next 5 years. Some of them we knew already. You know, I mean, I suppose one of the things that was most obvious to me, that because the Tories had said it, and it was certainly is what they were planning to do, what they are planning to do in terms of trade union law, and that's, I think, really quite terrifying, that they will bring in laws that mean that unless you have a ballot that 50% of those eligible to vote participate in and 40% vote yes, then strike action will be illegal. We've already been, you know, very, very hampered by the existing trade union legislation, but this is clearly an attack on public sector trade unionists who have been able to continue to take strike action, even if not as often as we would like. We saw today the papers full of the attacks on the BBC that are going to come. I know that everybody in this room has probably been involved in protests complaining about the coverage, the BBC coverage not being enough in our favour. But actually, from the point of view of the ruling class, it's still a thorn in their side. And the breadth of coverage that if for example, if people have been in the States and you compare the output of the BBC with any of the broadcasters in the States, it is terrifying, and it feeds into what's happening with the marketisation and the destruction of genuine education in terms of producing a very functional society in which people aren't brought up or nourished to be able to think for themselves. We're obviously going to see, and I think the speculation in the press today that Cameron will bring the referendum forward to 2016 is probably wrong, but whenever we see the referendum on the EU, it's undoubtedly going to be a carnival of reaction. And, you know, Farage's resignation lasted 30 seconds, and UKIP are going to be rubbing their hands with glee. We've seen that one of the things that they've announced very quickly, we already knew that disabled people had been very much on the front line of the attacks of austerity prior to the election. Access to work is one of the first things that they're going to attack, and so disabled people are yet again in the front line. So there's an awful lot of things that we need to discuss and think about how we're going to resist. But when we step back from the shock of the fact that the polls got it completely wrong, I think without being complacent, we can say that although we didn't put all the bits of the jigsaw together correctly, actually some of the things we've been talking about over quite a long period of time actually came to fruition in what was a horrible thing on Friday morning. So if we look at what were some of the key elements of what happened, firstly, I think everything that we've said and the importance that we've understood about the developments in Scotland over the last long period of time, culminating in the referendum campaign and everything that came out of it, understanding that the movement, the Yes campaign, was an anti-austerity campaign. It wasn't, as both Labour and the Tories tried to paint it, a campaign of reactionary nationalism. And it's very interesting. We heard it in the run-up to the referendum, and then we didn't hear it again until this week, after the election. You started hearing interviews with people who joined the SNP, and in one case, an interview with somebody who's now an MP for the SNP, who'd been Labour Party members for decades, and said, I didn't leave the Labour Party, Labour left me. And I think, our understanding of that dynamic has been very important. Our understanding of the way that Labour played a central role in Project Fear. You can say, thinking about it, that Thatcher destroyed the Tory party in Scotland with the introduction of the poll tax, and then Alistair Darling and Abe, assisted by his not so glamorous assistant Gordon Brown, had destroyed Labour in Scotland through their completely craven adoption of unionism and hand in hand with the Tories. I think what will happen now in Scotland is very interesting, because clearly the SNP have seen a massive growth in membership. It's clear that they're going to play a significant role not only in politics in Scotland but in politics in Britain in the coming period. Certainly one of my favourite, and there aren't many to choose from, but favourite moments of Thursday night was the victory of the young 20-year-old, and everything that I've seen since, including holding an SNP Friends of Palestine poster, leads me to believe that there's somebody to watch. And I think there will be divisions and debates opening up in the SNP itself, which will be interesting to watch. I think what's also clear, on Saturday night I was at the Rich Mix in Bethnal Green, listening to Cat Boyd from the Radical Independent Convention. One of the things she said, and I think again it goes back to the fact that the Yes campaign was an anti-austerity movement, is RIC and other organisations in Scotland will be holding the SNP MPs to account that, having stood on an anti-austerity platform, there is still a vibrant movement to hold them to account and to make sure that, if people start thinking they can do dodgy deals, there's going to be a backlash against them. So I think that's important. I think we understood the importance of UKIP. There were differences among, I think the last time I was in this room, and a number of us were in this room, was our public meeting before the election on UKIP, in a situation where many people on the left said, oh, UKIP's just a flash in the pan, it'll go away. It's going to do well in the Euros, but it won't be consistent. Where I think there were differences amongst comrades is the extent to which UKIP would punish Labour in its own heartlands. And certainly I was never convinced either way, but as soon as I saw the first result coming in from Sunderland, it was very clear that those people who'd argued that it was going to do damage in Labour's heartlands was very, very clear. Yes, it's true that the first three results were Labour victories, but they were also UKIP seconds, and UKIP very significant seconds, and that's not an unimportant thing. We also said absolutely consistently for 15 months that the elections was Labour's to lose. I don't think any of us dreamt quite how badly they were going to do it, but I think that was absolutely right. And what we're now seeing in terms of the Labour Party since the election is an overwhelming further lurch to the right, with the Blairites obviously in complete ascendancy. I wouldn't be surprised if David Miliband came back. Clearly, to make that statement, he's keeping his options open. And while I think Ian Lavery will at least attempt to stand, who's the member of the NUM and the chair of the trade union group of Labour MPs, will attempt to put a candidacy forward. There's no doubt that the overwhelming dominant rhetoric is to the right. And I think one thing that we said, but I think we didn't emphasise enough, which Susan draws out very well in an article that she wrote this weekend, and which will be up on the website as soon as I've got time to put it up tomorrow, is the way that the debate on the economy played into this, because I think that Labour completely conceded ground to the Tories by being the party of austerity light, and that meant that they couldn't answer the argument of the Tories that they were to blame for the crisis. And so in this situation where people were absolutely furious with what the banks did, and that actually gave the opportunity to the left to explain how capitalism as a system works and all of those things, what happens, the Tories are able to get away with saying, oh, it's too much spending on austerity, and the harvest of that is that millions of people will resist their own library closure, their own old people's centre, whatever, but don't see the possibility of fighting austerity or cuts or whatever we want to call them as a whole, because they don't see that there's any alternative, and Labour are completely complicit and tied up in all of that. And I think it's something that we really need to find ways to raise in a more systematic way. We were wrong about the Liberal Democrats. It's clear that, you know, the Lib Dems not only lost more votes, and I have to say that I thought they would hang on to some of their traditional bases, particularly in places like the South West, which were old Liberal strongholds before the Lib Dems were invented, and that, you know, some people would be seen as reasonably good constituency MPs. I knew that they had it with the generation that they conned over the war and then over tuition fees, but I thought they might hang on to more of their older base, but they didn't. And obviously in a situation where the maths was very tight, those things were very important. I think from the point of view of the radical left, we knew that it was going to be a hard road. I think what the results overall was reinforced for me is how much damage a history of past sectarianism and self-proclamation has done us, and that we're further back than I'd given credit's the wrong word, given credence to is the right word. But I think it's important that we don't draw the wrong conclusions from that. I think there are two things that are kind of, I see as being some of the dominant discourse coming from other people on the left. One is that we just have to try a bit harder. Again, as I say, I was at this do at the Rich Mix, God, it's hard to say, on Saturday night, and one of the people on the panel was Owen Jones, who is generally quite entertaining and amusing, even if I don't agree with him politically. He was dreadful. He was absolutely awful, and he was absolutely awful because basically what he said is we all have to do 4 times more. Now, in a room that was full of lots of people that I knew who'd been doing 4 times more than was humanly possible, it was really not helpful because it's moralism. And it's just hopeless. So I think on the one hand, that's completely useless. And on the other hand, I also think that to say, oh, well, elections don't get us anywhere, let's just do community organising. Absolutely we have to do organising in the workplace and in the communities, and we have to look at more creative and better ways of joining those things up. But I absolutely think that one of the things we can see from the elections, look at the Green Party, who, you know, under this hideous, undemocratic system, and we absolutely have to make fighting for PR a higher priority for the left in this situation. I don't believe Douglas Carswell's going to carry through his acceptance speech by spearheading the campaign, and I think the left absolutely needs to, because it's an outrageous system. But, you know, the Greens are seeing a massive surge because, among other things, they have consistently and patiently built up support over a long period of time. And I think what that means, I think the best results we could see on the outside Scotland, which is obviously a completely different situation, from an anti-austerity party with the National Health Action Party, who stood 12 candidates, extremely well targeted. So they stood mainly against high-profile Tories. They ran a campaign that was planned and organised well in advance. They had the candidates selected well in advance, and I think those are the sort of things that we need to learn lessons from in terms of elections, as well as picking up on some of the local things that we need to, you know, which obviously vary from situation to situation. So I think Fred's probably telling me to shut up.
You've guessed that you've sort of
yes.
15 minutes or so. So